Hello, everybody. My name is Christopher Johnson. I'm going to be discussing social Meliorism and investigating how it's related and comparative and transnational education. So, I found that the purpose and process of public education can be found in the historical and philosophical foundations and themes of comparative education. So, the purpose of education to prepare children to become responsible citizens, knowledgeable workers, and therefore educators should impart specific aspects that instruct and provide students with necessary tools to become such. Fink describes that there are four areas in which this can happen that can help them develop as individuals the ability to engage others in positive way, become thoughtful and engaged citizens, and prepare the world for. So the process in which education should be structured should allow each teacher to facilitate the necessary tools to ensure students have a balance between becoming responsible citizens and knowledgeable individuals. These foundations can guide educators as they work and guide schools to make better education. So what I'm going to do is discuss or examine social meliorism at its root meaning, specifically the impact education attempts to improve conditions of schools and how social meliorists believe that education is a tool to reform society and create changes for the better. Secondly, I will offer recommendations and a discussion on how comparative and transnational education themes such as social meliorism can improve the state of education in the United States and other places. Moreover, I'll examine how historians, philosophers believe students should be taught to challenge the status quo and become agents of change. So when you think of social meliorism, you think of pragmatism, and Koopman says that melioristic ideas have long been an idea that has shaped a change in education through a pragmatic view. The overarching theme to meliorism is that humans have the capability to change the world around them. Education is a means to help children become thoughtful citizens and have the capacity to discern from right and wrong and who have an understanding of ethics of our society. It was Kleibard who first termed the coin social meliorism when he discussed the American curriculum, the four philosophies of which he calls humanist, social efficiency, developmentalist, and social meliorist. In social meliorism, there's a belief that education is a tool to reform society and create change for the better. The socialization of goal was based on the power of the individual's intelligence, the ability to improve intelligence through education. An individual's future was not predetermined by gender, race, socioeconomic status, heredity, or other factors. Some critics did contend that this group has goals that are often difficult to measure and a product that has slow. There were two main tenets to social meliorism. The first is that environments can be improved under any circumstance, and the second aspect to meliorism is that it is always possible to make things better through community-based initiatives. Social meliorists like James, Kleibard, Koopman, and Wilson consider that education is an instrument to transform society and generate change for the better. Dewey claims that social progress is not inevitable, but up to humans to make it, as individuals, to make it. In order to make this happen, we need to become agents of change. Bowles and Gentis believe that schools are socializing students to adhere to society's norms and maintain that hierarchical structure of society by which the author describes as a correspondence principle. This concept does not allow for education system to become agents of change, nor does it allow improvements in the education system because it maintains the status quo. The author also contend that not only does schooling prepare students for the workforce, but the relationships learned. The teacher-student relationship correlates to the boss-employee relationship. This relationship helps build a balance of responsible citizenship and knowledge to workers, but to what extent? This seems to follow with Bordeaux's social reproduction thesis, in which students enter schooling with a certain amount of social and cultural capital. Students from lower socioeconomic status have far less cultural capital than those of affluential students or affluent students. It's my belief that people who encourage what they help to create will work harder for a purpose in which they are informed about. Involving others in issues that concern them will create a sense of teamwork in mind. People must believe in changes and must be willing or to change, or changes will never be successful. By involving others and providing the necessary resources during the change process, the likelihood of the change being successful or more feasible. Another way that change can be made by conducting a comparative analysis of education both here in the United States and worldwide. This lens allows educators to examine change that could assist in improving schools in certain regions or even national spaces. Russ Johnstone and Alaf contend that receptivity, resistance, and restoration, which are very similar to Melioristic ideas of any circumstance that can be made better and through the community. So one major focus of comparative education, as described by Russ Johnstone and Alaf, is that receptivity, resistance, and restoration, which is very similar to Melioristic ideas of any circumstance can be made better, and through community it can be achieved. How schools are receptive to change and what kind of resistance and restoration is needed. So Phillips and Schweitzer argue that there are four purposes to comparative education: promote knowledge, reform and development, gain perspective of international education system, and international goodwill. These ideas correspond with the Melioristic philosophy, both in comparison of the United States educational systems and that of like Cuba and Mexico, help explain that the phenomenon of social meliorism and what it means to transnational and comparative education. In exploring the recent 2016 presidential campaigns, according to a Gallup poll, only 4% of Americans are worried about education. Cashman argues that social meliorism allows for dialogue on how to improve societal conditions. This is one dialogue that both the general public and the presidential candidates are not having. The biggest challenge in the United States educational system is that the federal mandates on accountability, which leads to high-stake testing and pedagogy. This is what Grunewald argues is leading the teachers to teach to the test. Taking action against apparent and blatant societal, governmental, and financial oppressions is another key element to the ways that we can offer melioristic views in the United States education system, according to Grunewald and Fred. So these effects of social meliorism is not only felt in the U.S., but it's also felt worldwide. The three major tenets in comparative education mentioned before from Russ Johnstone and Alaf are receptivity, resistance, and restoration. Each facet offers a different focus and helps countries such as the United States, Cuba, and Mexico share educational influences and allow for each other to adapt to a system to improve their own deficiencies. Gary offers a unique perspective in how in Cuba there is no concept of racism, although many students are prevented from entering into fields such as tourism out of school. Social justice is one strand that is taught in the United States. However, it does not receive much attention in countries such as Cuba and Mexico. One major difference pointed out by Gary in comparing U.S.-Cuban educational systems is that there is a large emphasis on individualism in the curriculum, and a student is placed before the community or society in the United States. This, however, is not the case in Cuba, where the community is placed well before the individual. The educational system that seems to be very similar to the United States is that of Mexico. While there are some stark differences, similarities in the format of schooling, including subjects that are taught, budget allotment, one difference that sticks out the most is the expectations of parental involvement. While parents in Mexico are not asked for advice on school success, where in the U.S. it's often encouraged to give feedback and determine programs schools have offer. So the necessities to accumulate test scores, graph test scores, and analyze student test scores is taking away from precious time that should be used to concentrate on social skills and teaching communication in the classroom. I think it is possible to regenerate the concept of Meliorism in public schools and open a critical dialogue among other nations on how to implement a transnational education. Even though the recent educational guidelines that are regulating schools, there is still optimism that these policies will be reformed through social efforts and reject the profit-oriented educational companies whose primary goals is not educating students. Contrary to the testing giants, especially here in Texas, and their efforts to produce profits, education and accountability are more than student performance on standardized tests. Learning to make logical decisions as contributing members of a voting populace remains crucial. As our interconnected world becomes increasingly digitized, the potential that we become society made up of self-absorbed individuals falling deeper into a pattern of uncertainty. When students are not equipped for realities of our present world and have not been educated to interact fairly with decency in a group, we are creating individuals without the appropriate knowledge and understand complex issues. The focus of education should be primarily on the student. How can the school help the student become successful? The holistic approach to helping the student becoming the best that they can be is completely in line with humanist viewpoints of Dewey and Mann. In order to truly prepare students, we must offer change. The two pots for change, planned and unplanned. Planned change is what change management is about. Sometimes planned change is slow, but sometimes it's fast. Ultimately, we know that people don't like to have stuff done to them. Successful change generally involves a consensus and a partnership with others in the organization. This holds true to the first contentions that I spoke about with social Meliorism, is that environments can be improved under any circumstance, and that Meliorism is always possible is that it is always possible to make things better through community-based initiatives. I would agree that in order to make these changes and make better educational systems, that countries need to have an open dialogue about their education system in order to ensure that the future is bright for all students. Thank you. That is my conclusion about social meliorism.